Hi, my name is Bob Hebersat. I am a high school music teacher and co-founder of ShedTheMusic.com. Today I'm going to share with you my experience teaching music technology, the troubles that I've faced, and the solutions that I've created to make me feel better about teaching that class as a music educator and to give my students the best possible music education. So I teach high school music at Oak Lawn Community High School, which is located in Oak Lawn, Illinois. That's a suburb of Chicago. It's a ring suburb, so it's right outside the city. Our student makeup is quite varied. It's a blue-collar neighborhood. We have a large percentage of students that are on free and reduced lunch. There are 2 feeder districts that go into our school. We have a traditional band program, a traditional choir program. We also have a performing guitar program. And then we have, various general music courses. So we have Piano 1, Piano 2, Guitar 1, Guitar 2, Music Technology, Honors Music Theory 1, Honors Music Theory 2, and Honors Music Composition and Production. The students that usually take our Music Technology class haven't been in our music department yet. So they are Gen Pop students, general population students. And it's great to have a course like that as an introductory to the music department to get students in. That's one of the fantastic parts about teaching music technology is you can show other students, what this music thing is all about and get them in the field creating things, listening differently to music and thinking critically about music. So we also have students that have taken the course that are all-state choir students, all-state band students. We have students that are in our performing guitar ensembles and stuff that have taken the course. So it's this huge mix of students that have one-on-one aids all the way to students that plan on going to school for music education or music performance. So I've been teaching the course for around 9 years, and when I started, it was the curriculum was based heavily on loops and manipulating loops. And I think that a lot of music technology curricula at the time was based on loops. So GarageBand came out a little bit before that, and that opened up this world of music creating that usually was limited to people that had enough money to purchase Pro Tools or were still working in tape. And GarageBand came free with your Mac, and then you could create music. And the big thing that GarageBand had was a loop library. So you could drag and drop loops to make music that sounded awesome. And these people who've never had an experience with music before can create something that sounded amazing, and then they can import it into iMovie and score their weekend trip to the Everglades or something. But we had Mixcraft, which was the PC version of GarageBand, and there was a big technological limitation to Mixcraft. And so we had a lab with a bunch of PCs in it, and they were a little older. There were a lot of audio driver issues that we would have, but that wasn't the limitation. The limitation was with latency. So if I am to play a note on the keyboard, right now, I'm using, a newer Mac, and when I play a note, I hear it almost instantly. When I'd play a note on a keyboard connected to our PCs with GarageBand, there would be this long delay between when I played the note and when the sound would actually sound and when it would be registered. And it was impossible to do anything except for drag and drop loops because you couldn't play, a drum part or a keyboard part with a metronome, because you had that latency. There was one student who was able to figure it out, and he figured out how long the latency was, and he was able to play, huge scores, and it was just amazing. That student went to the Jacob School of Music, and now he's in New York as a jazz drummer. It took that level of student to be able to get around the latency problem. And I think music technology curricula was written with that limitation in mind, and it was all loop-based. And there's nothing wrong with dragging and dropping loops. I mean, if you're thinking about what is the best first thing you should do with your students, dragging and dropping loops makes so much sense. Students can drag over a drum track, drag over a bass track, drag over a guitar track and a keyboard part, and instantly they have something that sounds great. They feel awesome about themselves. They feel awesome that they signed up for the course. they have like this sense of pride in what they're creating, and it seems like the best thing in the world to do. But then it feels like you can do a few things with dragging and dropping loops. You can mess around with texture. You can also mess around with form. So, like create an AABA song form, create a verse chorus song form, create a rondo form, theme and variations. I've seen lessons where it's all right. It's Christmas time. Why don't you build your loops to look like a Christmas tree and think of Christmassy sounds? But it seems like you can only go a mile wide and an inch deep musically when you're just dealing with loops. Now, editing and cutting pre-recorded sounds, samples, is an art form. And there are entire musical genres that are built on that skill. And it's an important skill to have. But me as a music educator, I have like a really stubborn educational philosophy about product and process. I want to teach the process first, and the product, I believe, will come naturally as a student gains musicianship. And for me, dragging and dropping loops and some loop manipulation kind of side skirts some of the essential musicianship skills that I want my students to learn. Like I teach the guitar ensembles at my school, and I would rather them have a firmer foundation in the primary musical elements and be good musicians than me teach them by rote all the time so that we can play more difficult literature. I want them to understand the fretboard. I want them to understand time and different keys and know what they're playing when they're playing it instead of just reading the page. And as an educator, it was really difficult for me to throw that away and just start dragging and dropping loops. I would try to get students to play stuff in using the piano keyboard. I would try to get them to understand musicianship. But since they had that initial experience of dragging and dropping loops and they felt so good and it sounded great, like why would I try really hard to play this piano part and understand chords and triads if I could create something that sounded amazing by just dragging and dropping loops? There would be a small percentage of the class that would understand it. They'd get that you would have to practice and work to get like the sound that you have in your ear out into the DAW. And those would primarily be students that have taken music classes before. So students that are in band, students that are in a choir, maybe some students that have had experience working through problems like that. So some honor students, some students that are in sports. They know that practice gets to from point A to point B. But the majority of students, when I would introduce a topic on the keyboard, there would be this huge amount of pushback. Even after we got Macs at our school and the latency issue was resolved, we had the first year that we taught with GarageBand, we did loops, and there was no delay. There was no latency delay. When students played a note on the keyboard, it would come right out, and they would still give me pushback. And it led to some behavior problems, and it was like literally one of my least favorite periods to teach. I would have my guitar class, and we'd be talking about subdivision and rhythms, and we'd be transcribing things. And then I would have my theory class, and we would be doing solfege, and we would be getting dirty, and we would be like getting into the music. And then it'd be like, oh my God, music technology class is coming up. I have to do this song and dance and get these students interested in music, but only give them like a real cursory understanding of what music actually is. And I found that the problem is, if you were to like boil down the problem, we have process and product. I would rather my students be really comfortable with the process, and again, the product would present itself naturally. If we start with loops at the beginning of the music technology education, it flips it. It starts with product, and then students have a really difficult time understanding the rigor that goes in to the process because the product came first. It is great to get students feeling good initially about music technology and creating music and composing, but they're not actually creating music. They're dragging and dropping pre-recorded things. And eventually students would get frustrated that they had an idea for sounds that they wanted to create, and they couldn't find the loop for it. So, they would be like, Mr. Habersatt, how can I create this sound? And I would tell them, well, I mean, what sound do you want? And they would describe it, and then I'd play it for them. They'd be like, that's exactly what I want. Show me how to do it. I could show them, by rote how to make that one sound, but they couldn't extrapolate that concept and, get the sound that's in their head out on the DAW without me. It required me. And it was frustrating. It was frustrating for me. It was frustrating for my students, and I needed to come up with a different solution. So I came up with, flipping the pyramid. Instead of starting with product, why don't we start with process? Why don't we start with the foundational elements of music that we teach in all of our music classes first? Why don't we start with time, steady beat, subdivision, and then work our way to actual composition and scaffolding successful experiences along the way so students have good feelings about what they're creating, but they're also developing skills. And I took one summer, and all I did was listen to all of the pop music. I listened to so much pop music, and I transcribed everything. I figured out what was going on behind the scenes so that I could teach in a way where my students understand these basic musical concepts, and they're also learning how to compose songs that they'd hear on the radio. So I'm going to go through the process that I have figured out that works for my situation, go through the different units and show you what works. So the instrument of choice that I've used for music technology is the piano keyboard. Now, I know that there are a lot of other interfaces out there like the Ableton Push or like a Launchpad where it's mostly button interfaces, and you could interface with like a sequencer. So a sequencer shows, a basic step sequencer, shows the beat, and it shows the different parts of the beat, and then you can, put in the different slots where you want events to occur. It's really easy for writing drum loops and stuff. There is a skill involved, but it's not that much of a musical skill. And I think that this has been here since Bach. Bach played on the same pattern of black and white keys on a harpsichord. And if we can get our students to use the piano keyboard, then they're going to be able to translate what they learn in music technology class to, other courses. We have had students that have graduated from our music technology program after we flipped it around, that became jazz piano players, that joined in our music theory classes and have gone to school for music composition and music technology. And I think it is having the strong foundation of musicianship on the piano, turning music technology into a performance class using the piano keyboard as the primary instrument. I mean, if you go to a hotel and if you're in the lobby, chances are it's going to be a piano and they're not going to have an Ableton Push there. It's good to know, but I've never used an Ableton Push until I went to a conference and they had a bunch of pushes there. And I was able to play like really intricate drum beats. And everybody's like, whoa, how long have you been using the push? And I was like, 2 minutes, because the skills that I've developed by playing drums on the piano keyboard just, translated right away to the push. So I know that some people think that this is archaic, but I think this is here to stay. So I'm going to walk through my curriculum here and how I teach it. I break down music into different units. We have time, drums, bass, chords, melody, and form. So the first thing that we do in class is we talk about time. We talk about, the basic things that you talk about in a music class: beat, meter, subdivision, and rhythm. I use this form of musical notation called beat map, and I'm sure there are other terms for it. This is the term that we came up with, where it shows the beat, it shows the subdivision, and then it shows the 4 states of rhythm: the attack, the sustain, release, and rest. And if you're thinking about rhythm, those are the things that could happen outside of expression, outside of dynamics. There a note starts, a note exists for a certain period of time, there's an end to the note, and then there's also periods of rest. I started using this type of notation in my general music classes, and we do this kind of notation first, and then they really understand standard notation better because they have gone through beat map notation. So we explain these things, and then it's all about time. My first project is just working through steady beat, and this is one of the first tests that I give. And here, I'll play it, and you try this yourself.
All right, here is our steady beat test. When you see the number 1, you're going to say down and continue saying it throughout the measures of rest. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, so you're saying down, you're trying to get right on the metronome, and you're going to continue saying it through this hole. Okay, keep going. I'm sure you did well. Now you have 2 measures to keep that steady beat. All right, come back in. Now you have 3 measures to keep that steady beat. Okay, so you're a music teacher, you're a musician, you might have struggled through that. It slaps students in the face with music being rigorous, music being difficult. We don't touch the DAW until the 2nd unit. The 1st unit is all these foundational principles of time. And, I have students do the same thing with like a YouTube video. Somebody will pick a song, I'll assign a student to be the mute master, and the whole class will be keeping time, and the mute master mutes it while the song's still going on. So they're trying to find the beat, and then it comes back in, and then you'll see students that have never been in music class, they're like celebrating the fact that they're able to keep a steady beat, and the dialogue between students about a basic principle. The basic principle of keeping steady beat is amazing. So I'll have students that have never been in a music class before that say oh man, I went home and I practiced with the metronome so that, my steady beat can get better. And it makes me so happy as a music teacher, that they're so involved in the process. And, teaching this class made my time so much better. I've had students, the best guitar player and the best flute player that we have in the school right now. Same person. And she took music technology, and I asked her, did you enjoy the class? Because you understand all these things already. And she said, the biggest thing was my time got so much better, not just with writing music and playing things into soundtrack, but my time for guitar, my time for flute, it got so much better because when we record stuff into the DAW, it's with the metronome. And the better you are at recording things to a metronome, the easier it is to get your musical ideas out there. The less time you have to spend editing after the fact, the less time you have to quantize stuff. So students are able to see, all right, time is important. And then after time, what do? The next step is subdivision. So we had the beat, your steady beat, and then you have to subdivide that beat. You have to divide it into equal parts. So we have these different workout videos. The first one that I show is this one, and they have to say down.
We're going to work on subdividing the beat into 2, 3,
Fast
down,
forward, here we
and
go.
the end up. 2, 3, 4.
So they say down on the numbers.
Down.
On number 1, down and for 8th note, down E and for 16th note, and down pullette. And they're tapping their foot to the beat. But when we get later into the video, they have to move.
Down pullette, down E and down.
They have to move in between those different levels of subdivision. And the last few measures of it, you're going from 8th note to 8th note triplet to 16th note. And I don't know about you, but in my my performing ensembles, 8th note triplets, when you go from 16th note to 8th note triplets, it's, you could tell a good mature group by how they perform, going from duple to triple. If they go from eighth note to eighth note triplet or eighth note triplet to 16th note, you can tell how mature they are. And students will come in and they'll be like, man, I was playing along with this Travis Scott beat, and I heard the eighth note triplet in the hi-hat, and I heard it go back to 16th note, and I figured it out, Mr. Habersaid, I figured it out. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So after they do some of these workout videos, then I have them do a test. And this is my subdivision test. Is really simple. They have to, with a metronome, just say these subdivision syllables. They have to go through and follow these numbers. And that last two measures, going from eighth note triplet, 16th note, and this really is difficult. And the way that I grade it is, I grade steady beat, whether you're keeping your time, and then each level of subdivision has its own rubric item. So your eighth note triplet, your 16th note, how accurate are those? And it is transformative, starting out with this level of information, and then getting students to, have success, these basic principles, and then scaffolding that success slowly but surely until they're able to read rhythms. So then we have them read rhythms. The third project is I show them how to read beat maps. So there's a video on how to read beat maps. There's videos on pretty much how to do everything here. And I try to keep it fun and engaging. And then they'll read rhythms in, eighth note triplet, and 16th note subdivision. And I've had students in the first day that were reading beat maps perform this rhythm, this super syncopated 16th rhythm, with a large level of accuracy as a class. And if you're just thinking about your performance ensemble and the first time you tried to teach them 16th note syncopation, how long that took. Just the simplicity of the visualization of this rhythm in beat map really helps. So they have to pick one of these from each level of subdivision and perform it. They have to count and clap it to me. And I keep a metronome up here at two different tempi so that they can have it out on their iPad and practice and work on this. And then after this project, the next one it's pretty much the exact same thing, except we are moving to our hands. So when you play drums on the keyboard, there is a basic setup. You have the kick on C, normally it's C1, the snare on D, hi-hat is on F sharp, open hi-hats on A sharp, and then the mapping is really similar from DAW to DAW. So the fingers that play the instruments, I have them located so that it works really well. So I have index finger playing the hi-hat, and the snare with the index finger in the left hand, and the kick with the middle finger of the left hand. The instrument that usually plays the subdivision, and when we get into our drum unit, we go over this more, is the index finger of the right hand. So that is usually playing the bass subdivision of the groove. So if I'm playing this groove, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and the bass subdivision is, eighth note, and the right hand index finger is playing that subdivision. The instrument that usually changes, the variable, is the kick drum. And that's with the left hand middle finger. So the last project before students get to actually play things is they have to do the same thing. They pick a few of these rhythms, but the right hand has to play the basic subdivision, the bass subdivision. So if they're doing this, like number 2, eighth note triplet, the right hand has to play eighth note triplet, and then the left hand, the middle finger, is playing this rhythm. And they are training themselves to develop limbic independence, digital independence with your fingers, so that when they go to play in drum beats, their right-hand index finger can already play subdivision. Their left-hand middle finger can read the rhythms. And then the snare drum, which is your left-hand index finger, is going to play usually just the backbeat, which is beats 2 and 4, or beats 3 if you are doing something in a halftime feel. So that is my first unit. And it really focuses in students to the rigors of music making, musicianship, and they have huge amounts of success with this. It's amazing to see, students getting frustrated And like we talk about the practice process and like good technique for practicing, and like they'll do circuit training and interval training with we'll practice together, and like they're all trying to do this. And we're not on the DAW yet. We're still. I get past this out. I print these out. Call them my paper pads. So you can print this one out. It shows them what finger to use. It's my 808, or you can print this out. Then there's also this one that we print out. Where'd it go? Instrument mapping. So they can print this out, and it shows them what note is what. And they're actually playing it on like a piece of paper, and that limits the amount of something that I call PDD, patch distraction disorder. So when you're on the DAW, when you're playing through different instruments, when you're trying to find the right patch, you're spending so much time trying to find the correct sound and like getting distracted by all the cool stuff that you're losing what you're trying to do. The getting the sound from your head out to the DAW. Sometimes if you get so distracted with the patches, this eliminates all of that, because you're just working on developing the skill. It's all about skill acquisition at this point. Students can't be creative until they have the skills to create. So after that, we talk about drums and how to play drum beats. So, here's our anatomy of a drum beat page. It just shows like, the hi-hat plays the subdivision. Snare is usually on 2 and 4. Kick is on beat 1, and then it's on a couple other parts of the measure. And I show them how to keep symmetry and contrast in a beat. And then they go through the groove library. And in the groove library, it shows different beats in beat map form. Let's look at this basic backbeat. This is the first groove that I have them play. And when I have them play it, I don't have them play it on the DAW first. I have them play it in front of me on those paper pads, and they have to test with the metronome on, and then once they can pass that, then they get to go to the DAW. So these first few have actual videos where.
All right, this is our basic. All
Where
right,
I
so for this drum
explain-
beat, we have the hi-hat playing on all of the 8th note subdivisions. So we have 1 and 3 and
Where I explain the beat count by count and instrument by instrument, and I want to get the students feeling good about playing it and mastering it, so that when they get to actually record it, they don't have to think about 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It's just there. Unless you make a mistake, like I just did there. So that is the first groove we do, and then the second groove is they choose another a groove from the groove library, and then they have to record it. Now, the way that I grade a performance, so I'm in Soundtrap. I use Soundtrap as the DAW for this course. I love this DAW because it's cloud-based. Works on every platform, and the sounds are good. There's a excellent EDU level of it where you can, give out an assignment, and then every student's assignment goes in a folder, and it's really easy for students to collaborate with each other. Like, I can bring out my phone, listen to my project. I can make edits on my phone, press save, and then go to my PC or my Mac or my Chromebook the next day, and everything's there. There's a thing on the phone where you can just press this big red button that does a quick record, and then you can record a melody, press save, and then come back the next day, and it's there. I love it. And they're constantly updating it. And you don't have to pay for updates. You don't have to install updates. They're always giving new sound packs. Like the drums that we're listening to right now were released this week. And if you have, Soundtrap Premium, or if you have the EDU level of it, it's just automatically there. It's a freemium platform, so you can get away with using free versions of it. But I highly recommend getting the real deal. So this is how I grade those first few projects, and it's all about time. I'm going to try to show what happens with a student performance. So I recorded it. It's all here. Let's look at it. So I show students how to do this because this is how I'm going to grade them. So these are all the events that I created. You can see the measures. You can see the bar lines. See, that's beat 1. That's supposed to be 2. That's supposed to be beat 2. I have a little conference with my students. Like, all right, that's supposed to be beat 2. Were you early or were you late on beat 2? And they're like, all right, I was early. And then that's supposed to be beat 1, but it was super early. And then that was supposed to be beat 1, but it's even earlier. And that's like almost the end of beat 4, but I could see that the pattern is still there. I have boom, bap, boom, bap, boom, boom, bap. And it just, the time keeps getting quicker and quicker. So when I grade these, my rubric has, is the groove there? Are they playing the correct instruments at the correct time? Like, is the kick on 1? In this example, it was on the and of 3 and the and of 4. And the snare's on 2 and 4, and the hi-hat's on the 8th note subdivisions. And then there's a separate category for time. Like, were all the beats steady? Was the subdivision consistent? Was there any rushing or dragging? So I don't have students quantize their project. What quantizing is so I could click quantize, and there's different levels of subdivision. And what it's going to do is it's going to look at each note, and then it's going to bump it over to the nearest subdivision that you choose. So if I quantize this to, let's say, the 16th note, let's listen to what happens. Sounds good now. Uh-oh. Whoa. What? I don't know what's going on. And it's really difficult to grade that. So I grade in person, and then we have a little conference about, what do you need to get better at musically? And it's usually time. And then I have some different, things on the shed that help with time. Share some with you. I have these finger drumming videos for steady beat and simple groove, where I do, some fun things. The biggest thing is I tell students to play along to songs that they like. It doesn't have to have the same groove, but this one's fun. So these are just tracks that I've made that don't have drums in them. There's a version with the metronome and then there's a version without. So here's one without the metronome. I tell the students to figure out where the steady beat is and then try to play along. This is really hard. It's like really hard. I get students that are in drumline that come in and think they're all tough. And then like they've had drum set chops and stuff, and I throw that on and I was like, all right, play along with this track. There's no drums, and they might have it for like 4 measures and then it just goes away, and you can see in their face like the frustration, like, oh my gosh. So everyone needs to get better at time, and that's a really good enrichment and remediation tool, because if you play it with the metronome, because I have a version of it with the metronome, then there's a little more there to help out the student. And then we get into writing drum beats. So I have, I'm going to change platforms here really quick. I give organizers for my students. So when they are writing music, if they're away from the DAW, they're going to maintain focus a little better. So like in this project, they have to write 3 drum grooves. They have to write one in 8th note triplet, and 16th note. So they write it out. They show it to me first. I say, cool. I might, change some things based on my experience. So I know what's going to sound good. And there's a video on contrast and symmetry where you want to balance the different halves of a drum beat, so that's not too heavy in the first half and in the back half of the measure and stuff. But I give them some suggestions, and then after they get the okay, then they're off to the races. They're able to record this in. And in this one, they have to record 3 different drum grooves. They have to record the 8th note triplet, and the 16th note, and they're starting to feel good about what they're writing, and they're beginning to get the connection between their ear and the DAW, and that's my goal. And then after that, I talk about fills. So what is a fill? A drum fill is a way to connect phrases. It's a way to connect different parts of the music, and all you're doing pretty much in a fill is you're taking the subdivision from the hi-hat or the ride, and you're moving it to different instruments, and then that is creating the bridge. And you can have fills that last 2 beats, 1 beat, all 4 beats, and they normally, end at the end of a phrase. So this is my, the organizer for this project is you write 2 grooves, and then there's a transition measure, which is this 4th measure, and then you play the fill here, and that gets you to go from the first groove to the second groove. So if I'm just going to improvise. Measure 3, measure 4, and it's a simple groove, it's a simple transition, it's a simple fill, and it's really going to help when students go to actually write pop music, to go from phrase to phrase. Everything that is in the curriculum that I've created is in four measure phrases, because most pop music is in 4 measure phrases. So they're beginning to feel what 4 measure phrases are like, and then they can repeat those 4 measure phrases, add some variation, and then make larger chunks, verse, chorus, and bridge, and then later on add different textures with some of the chordal instruments. Let's look at the next unit. The next unit is bass. So they had drums. They're developing more and more technique on the piano. So there is a definite relationship between the bass and the kick. And usually the bass instrument plays with the kick on at least beat 1. And then, so there's like 3 different relationships. Bass and the kick are together all the time. Bass plays more than the kick, and the bass plays less than the kick. And then you add in a little bit of rest in between, so that there's a little more impact. Like if you just hold out a note all the way, then it gets rid of some impact here. So I use the letter and the octave number for notation here. So this is C1. And it's still in beat map form. It's really easy to see the duration. In the first level of the course, I don't do standard notation at all. That extra layer of abstraction is really difficult for students who don't have experience working with that. So I just get rid of it, and we just do beat map notation. So the first project I do for bass is they have to write a drum groove, and then they have to write a bass line for each of those relationships. And they're just using the one note. They're just using C1. And then they go to play it, and the kick lines up with the bass. It sounds good. And then we talk about the different notes on the piano. So the next project is learning the notes, and I have them learn them in 2 positions. So we have like what would be C position, where the pinky of the left hand is on C, and then what would be E position with your thumb over here. Call this position 1 and position 2, because everything we do in that first level is in the key of C, and sometimes you get to the 1 chord and you want to go down to the 1 chord. Sometimes you want to, if I was going 6, 4, 5, 1, 4, I have to go down in the octave. Sometimes you want to go down to tonic, and sometimes you want to go up to tonic. And learning those two hand positions helps them with learning those different movements. So after they learn that, then I have them go through, and they are doing a chord progression that I have created for them. So this organizer, they still have to write their own drum groove. They have to write the rhythm, but I've given them the chord progression. It's a 6, 4, 1, 5. That's ubiquitous, but they're still composing the rhythm, and it has to match their kick. And then we talk about actually writing their own chord progression. And this ruffles feathers. This chart ruffles some feathers. But the traditional way of thinking of chord progressions with fourths, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1, and then there's some, like you could do a 4 to a 6, and 5 can go to a 6. Deceptive cadence. That's great. But there are a lot of types of movement that aren't represented by that. And the biggest thing is parallelism. But only, the guideline that I give is you have to either start or end on a stable chord. And I know that these aren't like the most stable of chords, but these are the chords that could sound like home bass. And then, if you create a progression where you start or end on one of these chords and you just follow the rules, it's going to sound good. You can create your basic chord progressions with this chart. You can create some different ones. In the second level of the chorus, we get to like secondary dominant functions and modal borrowing and all the crazy fun stuff. But I want students just to start hearing the sounds of the different numbers. And the more they do it, the better they're going to get at, translating the sound to the instrument. And then they're going to, write their own chord progression. So in the next project, if we flip over here, they are writing an original chord progression. So they write the drum beat again. Here's a chord progression organizer. So they have a place to organize their chord progression. And then they're writing in, the drum beat, and then they're coming up with the numbers, and they're showing me what the chord name is, and then they have to write out the bass line. And the last project of this unit is about moving bass lines. So it's all about octave jumps and leading tones. I know that you can do fifths, and you can do thirds and stuff to create walking bass lines, but octave jumps and leading tones are the big types of movements that are in most pop music. So an octave jump would just be like if I'm playing the 4 chord, I got to go down my octave again. And maybe I'm going to the 1 chord, 4, 1 chord. Adds just that forward momentum that you hear in bass lines. And then, students just write out same kind of thing. They're just writing the rhythms. They're, again, we're scaffolding successful experiences here. So they're writing out the simple rhythms. They're writing out their chord progression. And then, I go down there. And then they're just writing in octave jumps and leading tones. There must be at least 1 octave jump and leading tone in the 4-measure phrase. So now they can play drums and bass. And then at this part of the course, I introduce a couple new concepts. So they're all about skill building, and we're doing these really specific projects, but they haven't had any time to flex their compositional muster. They haven't created anything. It's all based on these really specific, strict rules. So there are 2 things that I start after this unit. The first is called the 20% day. 20% in if you work for Google. 80% of the time you work on one topic. Maybe you're a Google Maps person, and then you show, 80% of the time, 4 out of the 5 days a week, you work on Google Maps. But one day of the week, you're able to work on whatever project you want. And most of the innovations that have come out of Google have come from those 20% days where people are working on their passion projects. So after Unit 3, after they learn bass, I give 1 day a week where they work on whatever they want using the skills that they have. And you immediately see that they're like, oh man, my piano chops need to get better so that I can get the ideas out that I want. Or I need to know more about chord progressions. That's the questions that they're asking me after they do these 20% days is musical. They're musical questions. And the other one I do is an Against the Clock project. So Fact Magazine, I think it's a British publication, but they have a YouTube presence, and they take producers, they go to their studio, they film them, and they give them 15 minutes, and they have to create something new in 15 minutes. And it's really interesting to see because there are these heavy producers that are still dragging and clicking and editing notes with the mouse, and you'll see the students snicker at it because they're like, they don't even know. And then you'll see some really awesome ones that are playing in drum beats, and they can get stuff done quick. But an Against the Clock project, we might take a project that have taken 4 days to complete, and I'll say, all right, now you have 20 minutes to do it. And it really isolates their musicianship. If they don't have the chops to perform it, then they have to re-record it, and you see them get frustrated, and then the same kind of conversations can occur after the fact, all right, what do you need to get better at? Oh man, I need to get better at my time. I need to get my 8th note triplet subdivision is horrible, and you hear them have that conversation with me, and you hear them have that conversation with each other. And again, it makes me a happy music educator because they're thinking about the things that I think are important. So the next unit is about chords, and we talk about how chords are constructed, have a couple videos and documents that go over how to spell chord roots, thirds, and fifths. And then, I can have conversations like, all right, well, how do you spell the 5 chord? And it's in the key of C. The 5 chord is G major. It's G, B, D. And the first project is they have to write, drum groove, bass line with octave jumps and leading tones using a 4-5-6-6 chord progression. And then they have to, tell me how to spell the 4-5-6-6 chord progression. And the cool thing about this chord progression is you can perform it with all root position triads. So, we have 4, 5, 6, 6. So they don't have to worry about inversion. It's really easy for them to 4, 5, 6. And it sounds cool, you have like I put in a little passing chord there, but they're gonna sound good, and they're developing the chops. We talk about, not to buckle the knuckle when you play the piano and like proper technique, but it's all in the scope of writing cool sounding music. And they're really once you get into the chords, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm making music now. It's so cool. And then we talk about inversion, how to invert. So we have the bottom voice, the middle voice, and the top voice. And what are the locations of the different voices? And then the second project is they need to write a chord progression, and then they need to invert the triad so that common tones, so they have to write a chord progression, and then when they invert the triad, they have to keep common tones in the same voice. And what that's going to do is, so I'll go here, like let's say I'm going to do a 1-4-6 chord progression. If I played them all in root position, 1, 4, 6, there's a lot of jarring movement. 1, 4, 6, even if I go the other way. But in between the 1 chord and the 4 chord, I have a common tone. It's C, and it's in the bottom voice of my first chord. So I want to invert the second chord so that the common tone is in the same voice. I want it to be in the bottom voice. So C is the 5th in the 4 chord. So I want to revoice the 4 chord so that the C is in the bottom voice, so it needs to be in second inversion. So I go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. And then from the 4 chord to the 6 chord, we have we have 2 common tones. We have C and A, so I need to play this in first inversion. And now, when I go to play 1, 4, 6, it's a lot easier to play. It also sounds better, and this is the foundation behind how I teach melody writing too. So after they're able to, write out chords with inversions, then we talk about texture. And Project 3 and Project 4 in this unit are all about texture. So I break down texture into different types. We have pads, punches, ostinatos, and riffs. A pad is a chord that's held out for a long time. So like there's a pad. And a punch is, it's a punch. It's a note that is short. So we have pads and punches. And then we also have an ostinato. So an ostinato is like a repeating rhythmic pattern. And then we have a riff. And a riff has some elements of melody in it. And usually you alternate between voices. And when you add in different rhythmic rolls with different instruments, you are creating the harmonic texture. So if you listen to like a repeated section of a song, the first verse and the second verse usually has something different with the harmonic texture. They might just have pads and punches in the first verse, and maybe they add in an ostinato and a riff in the second verse, or they switch it up. Maybe in the bridge they tear everything down and they just have pads. And it's interesting to listen to the music in that way, and then when students go to write, they know how to manipulate the harmonic rhythm to add interest and contrast to repeated sections of their song. So I have them do one project where they have to write with pads and punches, and then another project where they have to write with ostinatos and riffs. So the next unit is about writing melodies, and this is usually where it was really difficult for me to get students to write melodies that actually sound good before, and in transcribing literally hundreds of pop songs over the last few years, I've come up with a couple tools to help students write melodies. I want them, in the end, to be able to hear a chord progression and be able to sing a melody on top of it. and have it be 100% original and have it sound good. Some students can do that right away, and it's great. Most can't. You can give some, parameters. Use the major pentatonic scale, and it could sound good, but it could also sound poor. So we start off with rhythm, and I say that melodic rhythm needs to have syncopation, repetition, and space. And syncopation, I define syncopation. It's taken me a long time to get to this definition, but syncopation is when you have an attack on a weak beat without an attack on the strong beat before it. And there's different levels of syncopation. An eighth note, it would be you have an attack on an and without an attack on the number before it. 16th note syncopation, it would be you have an attack on an E or an without an attack on an and or a number before it. I have students tap their foot and they come up with syncopated rhythms. And then they have to have repetition, and there's different, so for repetition, we're thinking about 4-bar phrases again, and the repetition is measure by measure. So like the first measure is always going to be the A rhythm, and then it needs to repeat somewhere, like this is an ABAC phrase repetition structure, and it happens all the time. And then melodies need space. It's really important for melodies to need space. You get students writing like melodies, and there's like notes all over the place. It's like, calm down. Think about a singer needs to breathe, and maybe they're going to sing your melody. So you need to have space in there for them to breathe and for the audience to listen too. So those are the parts of the melodic rhythm. And then the first project that I have them do is they're just writing lyrics using a melodic rhythm. They could record it if they want to, but they're writing the rhythm here, and then they're writing the rhythm here, and then they have to write one syllable per attack. And it's really cool to get students writing that stuff. So once they understand melodic rhythm, then we talk about melodic pitch. And again, I want them to be able to hear melodies and play them, but that might not be successful with everybody. So I teach how to write melodies using voice leading. So we have our chords that we've already, inverted for chords, and like this is a 1-4-6-3 chord progression. And for the first project, they have to write a melodic rhythm. Whoa, there's my melodic rhythm, and then they have to stick on the same voice. So I play jazz guitar. They're right over there. And when I am playing a chord melody, I am thinking about the top note. That's the melody. I'm going to play it a little louder, and then the notes underneath match the chord, the harmony that I'm on, and that links the melody to the harmony. I find that there's a lot of times when students write melodies, it's not linked to the harmony. Even if I give them the notes of the chord, it's not linked. This forces that link. And so they write melody using one voice. It's a one-voice melody. It's guaranteed to sound good because all these notes are in the chord. When you go from one chord to the next, there's smooth voice leading. The next project, they can switch voices inside of one chord, but when they go from one chord to the next, they have to stay on the same voice. So in this example, you go from the top voice. So I'll play it. We're on the top voice, and then we go to the middle voice, and then you stay on the middle voice. And then when we go to the next chord, stay on the middle voice, bottom voice, and then bottom voice. And that sounds good. And it's how melodies are written, but I've never seen it explained like this until I was figuring out guitar, and that's what's going on is it's voice leading. And then to make the melodies a little more singable, you add non-chord tones. So I have a page on non-chord tone types, and then you add in non-chord tones, and that's going to make the melodies connect. You can connect with leading tones and escape tones. I have my non-chord tone page right here, so they can learn what the different non-chord tone types are and how they work in a melody. And then they're writing. So we have the first project is one voice, then multi-voice with non-chord tones. The last unit rather is about form, and they are going to write full pop songs here. So in the form project, we the first thing we do is we listen to pop songs and we transcribe the form of pop songs. And usually, like, I keep this hidden. I just show the top of this on the screen, and I keep this hidden. This is like the stock song form. And 9 times out of 10, I'll have students transcribe, the form of the song we're listening to, and it'll be a song that the students chose, and then I show the bottom, and it's almost the exact same. It's crazy. And I've actually written a song about pop songs that talk about the. I'll just play like the beginning of it. This is just it's fun to watch with the students. So it shows the drum beat. It shows the chord that's being played, the number of the chord being played. It shows which instrument is being used, so it shows the harmonic texture. And then it's talking about pop songs, shows what the bass is doing with octave jumps and leading tones. And
write melodies with
this is actually
a
a song that I created during a 20% day. So it took 20 minutes to record the song with the words. It took like 3 days to animate because I don't know how to animate stuff, but I was really proud of this rocket ship. Ready? Rocket ship. Dang, there we go.
It's a pop song, it's a dumb pop song, it's a pop song, silly pop song.
And I'll stop that. But it's fun to watch with students, and it teaches them about the different parts of the song. So in the form unit, the first project, they're transcribing. So they have to listen to, they pick a pop song, they tell me what the pop song is, and then they have to, explain what happens. And then after that, they have to come up with their own. And not only do they have to tell, what the order of things are, they have to explain the harmonic texture. So, like, what is going on? Is there, what chordal instruments are being played? And then from there, they're writing the full pop song. Like, they are, if they have a, intro, verse, chorus, bridge, double chorus, ending, they're writing each part. They have to show, what the drum beat's doing, what the bass line's doing, the different chordal parts, how you're going to vary texture. And at the end of the course, they have a pop song that is about like 3 minutes long. Sounds like it could be on the radio. If you took the melodies and you added words to them, and if you recorded the words, it's a pop song. And it's really cool to have students that have never had a music class in their life get into this and get like addicted to like learning and love what they're doing. It's really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just write a 4-measure phrase, and I'm going to talk about what I'm doing while I'm doing it. I'm going to show you what the end product is. I mean, it's not going to be the full pop song, but it'll give you an idea of what students are going to create and how they're going to create it. So again, I'm on Soundtrap, and I'm just going to record a 4-bar drum loop here. All right, and I'm going to quantize it really quick because my time wasn't perfect. And let's hear how that worked out. Okay. Bump, 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 bump. And there's my rhythm for the kick. Bump, 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 bump. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to write a bass line. I'm going to do 4, 6, 1, 5, and I'm going to match that kick drum rhythm. So that kick drum rhythm, I was on 1, So I'm going to match that rhythm. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. I added a little extra attack there. So now I'm going to, quantize to the 16th. I'm going to move this over. So I have that, and let's add in a keyboard part. So we had, go back over here. We had, 4. Boom, boom, on to 6. Boom, 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 boom. And I'll just do pads on this first run through. Starting with the 4 chord. Okay, and let me quantize that thing. And let's add in one other chordal rule. I'm going to just do an ostinato. I've been really heavy into using glockenspiel. It's 2020 is the year of the glockenspiel for me. So let's do, 4 chord, 6 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord. Okay, I like that. That sounds cool. So let me go to record that. Okay, and let's trim the end of this, boink, and quantize it to the 16th. So now it's time to do a melody, and I'm just going to use a piano. Maybe I'll add a little bit of reverb to it, and I am going to try to write it by ear because that's the way that I like to write. All right. Okay, and let's record that thing. Press record. 2, 3, 4. Okay, and if I quantize that, it had syncopation, repetition, and space. And if we loop it, and if we take away the metronome, loop just those 4 bars and get rid of the metronome. I'll turn it down a little bit so I can talk on top of it. What we're left with is, something that the students created that sounds good, and it was just a basic manipulation of the foundational principles of music that, at least me as an educator hold close to my heart, and that the students now understand, and they have skills that transcend this course. They can play piano, they know how drum beats work, they know chord progressions, and they know how to write melodies, and they can listen to music differently. That's my solution to this problem. So let's go over the platform. So I've been on the platform this whole time, and this is a new curriculum hosting platform that we just released recently. And if you are a student, so let's go to the student portal here. You have all of the units: time, drums, bass, chords, melody, and form. Let's jump to just a random project. So let's do the drum pattern writing. So each project has different sections, and the first section is the walkthrough. So there's a walkthrough video that is me
Hi, welcome to the shed.
explaining the project with a multicam view,
1 E and a 2 E and
where I
a 2 E
actually
and a
create the
4 E.
project and I record the project, and I show students how to do it. One of the most frustrating things is to explain the project and have like 3 kids absent, and then have them come back in the next day and be like, oh, what am I supposed to do? It's like, oh my gosh, watch the video. So they watch the walkthrough video, and then they understand how the project works. And then at the end of the video, there is, it just shows exactly how it works. And then there are some other resources. So like there's the anatomy of a drum beat. There's different how to create drum grooves with symmetry and contrast. And then you have the organizers for each project embedded into the platform. And then you can download it there if you want to print it out. It gives practice strategies. These are these drum tracks that I was showing earlier that don't have the metronome. And then it gives the prompts for exactly how you're supposed to record it. This one, you pick your own tempo. It's 4 measures, and you leave 1 measure of rest in between each groove. And then at the end, there's a reflect page, and I show my students the rubric for each project so that they know exactly what I'm expecting of them. And then I have them fill out this simple self-assessment form, just like, what did you do well? What can you improve on? What practice strategies worked for you? And then what do you want to get better at? And if they're always thinking about those things, then they're having a clearer understanding of practice and how to get better and how to improve. So that is the student platform. The student platform has those elements in it. On the teacher side, there is, let me get to the teacher resources. For each project, there is a page, and there's a big section at the beginning that just go over like things that you should know about sequencing and what kind of gear, how to advocate for your administration, supplemental activities like those 20% and against the clock things. But then let's go to that project that I was talking about. Start it. So there's a video lesson plan where I walk through what works for me, and it's more like off the cuff, just like me talking to you. And then there is a lesson plan, and in the lesson plan, all of these resources link to the proper page. So if you wanted to print out the rubric, you can just click it there, and then there's the rubric. And then it walks through remediation enrichment strategies. And down here we have a collaboration section where, if you find something that you liked in this lesson and you like created a new approach, we have teachers filling out that discussion board at the end where they can collaborate. So this platform is a yearly subscription, and we are our pricing is based on the amount of seats. So right now we're running a deal, a prorated deal for the end of this school year. So it's 2020, spring 2020. It's $200 for 20 licenses, $300 for 40 licenses. You can email me at shedthemusic@gmail.com if you need a quote created, if you have a different situation, like if you're on a full year schedule or trimesters, or if you need more than 40 licenses. We offer some professional development over the summer, and then we'll have a discount code for different conferences we're doing. So we're doing TMEA, so we're going to have a discount code for TMEA, like a 15% off. And follow us on social media. We update Facebook and Instagram all the time with new things. We're creating a second level of the course right now, which goes over like multiple measure drum grooves, how to humanize the drum beat, 16th note, triplets, swing, secondary dominant chords, modal borrowing, walking bass lines, things in all 12 keys. Then we're writing lead sheets. We're using music notation. We use Note Flight for that, and that should be available by next year as well. A lot of really exciting things, and we're always updating and changing. So it's, I'm a high school teacher. I'm using this in my high school classes right now. It is so nice to have all of it organized, laid out. It's a little odd walking around and seeing little videos of me on everybody's screens, but I only have to deal with the students that are at the polls, like students that are really struggling, that I can work with them, or students that already have it, I can work with them. And the majority of students in the middle, they have all the tools necessary to be successful. And if there's a tech problem, I can work on the tech problem, and it doesn't just like destroy the vibe of the class, because they have the tether, they have all of these resources available for them. So you can look at all of our free resources. If you go to Shed the Music, I'll show you where it is. If you go to shedthemusic.com, this is our homepage, and it might look different when you go there because we're always updating stuff. But if you go to classes and music technology, all of these resources are free, and they're always going to be free. And if you can just start looking through them, try to use them in your class. If you want to learn more about purchasing the curriculum, you can click there. The access to the curriculum is, if you go to the curriculum portal and then click on any of these, it'll bring you to the correct page on our platform. But thank you for watching. This is super exciting for me to share because it has transformed music technology at my school. It's made me a better teacher. It's made me a better musician. And instead of dreading this period of the day. I look forward to it. The numbers have grown in our school. Students are tracking into our honors music theory and honors music composition courses. They're going to school for music. They're learning the tools to be a musician, and they're also learning how to compose. So thank you very much.